Now let's be clear with who we're dealing with. Pierre Elliott Trudeau, if my conservative friends will forgive me for quoting him, said living next to the United States is like sleeping next to an elephant. No matter how friendly and even-tempered the beast, one is affected by every twitch and grunt. Now, the last few years, there's been a lot of movement from the beast next door. A lot of movement, maybe a little bit more than usual. And there will be more to come. So what do? Well, as conservatives, we like to look back in order to see forward. How do we get here? For more than 3/4 of a century after the Second World War, we lived probably in the most secure geopolitical environment the world has ever seen, right next door to the United States, which became the biggest economy and military in the history of our planet. The United States was not just a neighbor, it was the gravitational center of the global economic system. For Canada, this reality produced a deep sense of security. For the most part, that arrangement served Canada and the US extraordinarily well. The result was massive buildups of north-south infrastructure, roads, bridges, railways, pipelines, transmission lines. Our two countries built the St. Lawrence Seaway, which became an H2O highway from Duluth and Thunder Bay all the way to Europe. We built a free trade system and seamlessly integrated our economy. We enjoyed the longest undefended border the world has ever seen. We sided with each other in major conflicts, although our relationship was punctuated by the occasional squabble. Supply chains totally integrated. Investment accelerated, living standards rose, but a long period of risk-free living presents a new risk of its own: complacency. And let's be honest, we and they became complacent. We underinvested in our military. Bureaucracies grew and blocked in our resources. Politicians indulged in performative ideological grandstanding because they thought that they could afford to. We made ourselves unnecessarily dependent. At the same time, the global landscape was changing, and an overly complacent America was missing what was happening. China's economic expansion was one of the most extraordinary phenomena in the history of the world. This country went from having 80% of its citizens living on less than $1 a day to the second biggest economy in the world in one generation. While American capitalism had earlier buried clunky Soviet communism, a new authoritarian powerhouse quietly and rapidly snuck up on the US. All the economic enrichment came without the expected political liberalization. And one day, America awoke and realized that its entire industrial base had been hollowed out. Whole towns vanished to job outsourcing, and their economy was reliant on a country that was at best a serious rival and at worst a hostile threat. There was a backlash. Americans went from driving globalization to believing that they were its victim. Zero-sum mercantilism came roaring back to life. President Trump has sought to overturn the trading system that previous American presidents had championed and even created. Now, some of this correction, in fairness, was overdue, but it missed the target by going after countries like Canada, which were not the problem. What President Trump says about Canada is wrong. Our trade surplus does not represent exploitation by Canada of the United States of America. Quite the opposite, in fact. It is the result of us selling very good and very well-priced, in fact, below-market-priced raw materials, which America then upgrades and turns into massive profits for its economy. Ironically, U.S. workers gain six-figure salaries, turning our raw meat material into profit to their country, and they owe a big debt of gratitude to politicians and bureaucrats in Canada who have blocked us from building the necessary infrastructure to take those resources to world markets. He's also wrong to ignore the sacrifices Canada has made for the United States. Canadians fought and died along Americans in Afghanistan. And let's be clear, we did that exclusively in response to an attack on our American neighbors. We also fought and bled along America, not just in the trenches of Western Europe, but in Alaska's Aleutian Islands, defending American territory in the Second World War. And of course, we joined rapidly to fight communism in Korea, and in countless other ways, our cooperation, whether it's NORAD or our efforts to secure the Arctic, have been beneficial to both countries. And let's be clear about another thing. The President's talk of 51st statehood, whether it is a joke or not, is unacceptable. It goes without saying there is zero chance of Canada ever being a part of the United States. We love our country. We love our country just as Americans, understandably and justifiably, love their country too. And that's why so many Canadians are upset by the President's comments and trade actions, especially considering that Canada and the United States will always be neighbors. Geography is the most permanent factor in international relations. No country can call up a realtor and relocate. And the truth is, we wouldn't want to. Canada and the United States have built probably the greatest partnership any two countries have ever built in the history of the world. That partnership remains profoundly in the interests of both our peoples and both our countries. And it's important to distinguish between governments and people. Politicians come and go. People remain. The miner in Appalachia, the energy worker in Texas, the engineer in California, they do not wake up every day asking how they can stick it to the Canadians. That's just the reality. The American people are not our adversaries. In fact, survey results demonstrate that Americans overwhelmingly have a favorable view of Canada and consider our two nations to be friends. That goodwill, by the way, may be our most important strategic strength going into these talks. As President Kennedy said when he was addressing the Canadian Parliament, geography has made us neighbors. History has made us friends. Economics has made us partners. Necessity has made us allies. Those whom nature hath so joined together, let no man put asunder. That insight captures a reality deeper than any temporary dispute. Canada's prosperity and security are inseparable from a stable relationship with the United States. And that is why we should not declare a permanent rupture with our biggest customer and closest neighbor in favor of a strategic partnership for a new world order with Beijing, a regime the Prime Minister himself said was the biggest threat to Canada just a year ago. And we seek no fight with China or its people, who make up a brilliant and extraordinary civilization. But its government and its proxies have kidnapped our citizens, stolen our technology, interfered in our elections, and pushed fentanyl into our streets. Canada should talk and trade where prudent, but never make the mistake of confusing engagement with dependency. China is not a substitute for the United States of America. Canada should pursue diversified trade and global engagement. Conservatives stand in favor of a free trade agreement with India and deeper ties with other countries. But diversification must be grounded in realism. Not all partners are interchangeable. The Prime Minister proclaimed in the Davos speech that he wanted a new middle power alliance. Actually, there's nothing new about it at all. We already have that. We've had it for years. In fact, Canada already has free trade with over 50 other countries, and most of them are middle powers. We should look to deepen those relationships, but their markets are already open to us. But the problem, here's the problem, and here's the irony. The problem is not that these countries block our products from coming in, it's that our own government blocks our products from getting out. And that is the major trade barrier. Signing meaningless communiques or more stagecraft masquerading as statecraft won't fix that reality. In fact, Some of the worst tariffs imposed on Canada today are those imposed by the government here. Slow permits, changing rules, high taxes, outright bans on shipping oil off our northwest BC coast. We have the second slowest building permits anywhere in the OECD. It now takes 19 years to get a mine approved. None of that has changed in the last year.